Welcome to episode 198 of Empty the Bench on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Albano, Nick Morgasen. Follow us on social media at ETB Sports, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ETB Sports. Follow us on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/ETB Network. Make sure you follow us on our website, etbpodcast.com. And if you want to take us on the go, listen to us on Acast, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, not iTunes, and all other platforms where you can find us. A lot to get into this week.
Actually, you got to think about another screw-up. You got another screw-up because you said Twitter and you didn't say X.
Well, X Elon Musk at this point. By the way, we'll get into all that later. But a lot of baseball to get into. Shohei Ohtani is no-tay. Yes, you'll understand why in a little bit. Also, Guarantee Rate Field for the joke. Yes. Also, at Guarantee Rate Field, the home of the White Sox, there was a shooting, but when I tell you where the gun was found, you will be very confused.
Baffled, I think might be a better word.
Baffled. Yeah. Also, certain MLB pitcher retires. He's still going to be paid. Shocker. Also, Wander Franco back in the news again, and a lot of other MLB news and notes to follow. Also, NFL news is back in the forum. We just had our first NFL preview for the AFC. And we'll get into the NFC part 2. So make sure you follow that as well. But we have some NFL headlines and then maybe some extra stuff at the end. All right. Excuse me. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so much that we got to go through. And we begin with Shohei Ohtani. So early last week as if it was just we started like it didn't take place long after our last episode, but Shohei Ohtani seemed to come off of the mound. Something seemed to be wrong during his last outing. He walked off with the trainer. It was in game 1, I think, of a doubleheader that the Angels played, and it turns out that he has a tear in his UCL, the same UCL that he needed to get Tommy John surgery for during, I think it was October of 2018. And so he will not pitch again this season, but will continue to hit. In fact, he ends up hitting during game 2 of that Angels doubleheader, and he has a phenomenal hitting performance during that game. He is made of something else.
More like he's a robot or made of aluminum or whatever dumb saying you want to say about robots because he plays like a robot. But I don't understand. Then there were reports that I forgot the name of the GM, Perry something. I think it. And I'm going to look it up. But he basically came out in reports after the game and said Shohei and his agent refused an MRI. You really expect me to believe that?
On one hand, I could see Shohei and his agent not doing that simply for the fact that Shohei Ohtani, is going to be a free agent, the biggest free agent at the end of this season. On the other hand, Nick, does this not smell like of desperation from a team that went all in at the trade deadline when they should have sold? Although to be fair to them, they were actually around 500 or a little above it, that they were actually going on a winning streak. So maybe I shouldn't blame them for going all in. But, I mean, it's just, again, Nick, you think of the opportunities that the Angels had last season and this season at the trade deadline to trade Shohei Ohtani, and think about all the farm pieces that they could have gotten to restock and reload, and they completely passed on it. And now, because they went all in, and they ended up losing 11 straight. They lost a lot more than they won in August. That the idea of them playing in October is a complete distance. And now look who has egg on its face, the Angels. So I guess maybe they're trying to bring down Ohtani's value because to have some sort of shot at trying to get. But I mean, between this, Nick, and between another thing that we're going to be talking about, which I don't know how much you can put on the Angels for when there's something about Major League Baseball, but we'll get into that later in this episode. I just don't see how Shohei Ohtani would want to go back to the Angels.
Well, you have the whole issue of the Angels just didn't take any care of their star in Shohei Ohtani. I mean, they didn't care. They just were going to pound him to the ground because they want their precious ticket sales, or as Hank would say in New York, we want to sell our chicken buckets so we make money. Chicken tender buckets. Yes, I'm stealing a line from Hank and Dictor. You can watch on Hitting for the Cycle. But I'm reading the reports from Jeff Fletcher, who covers the Angels. He's kind of the big head honcho in that circle. And he said that Perry Mananson revealed that the Angels offered to do an MRI on Ohtani's arm after his cramping episode earlier in the month. And Ohtani and his agent refused because they didn't think it was necessary. Come on. What do you think that we're all smoking here? Like, you telling me that a guy who's going to be a massive free agent, we're talking about somewhere in the range of $600 to $700 million in free agent. You're telling me he's not going to go get his health checked out before he hits free agency? There's something not right there.
And again, and I think this isn't the first situation that we talked about with a team and a player's health, but you're saying that you made the offer and they refused. You are the team. You are the employer. You can say, go into the trainer's room and get an MRI done. You can't just, here's an offer to do it. What do you think? Like, if you're claiming that, Ohtani and his agent turned it down when Ohtani is going to be the next big free agent, like, again, on one hand, I could see Ohtani and his agent not wanting an MRI, but, like, what do you think is going to happen? Again, you are the Angels, and you are a Major League Baseball team, their employer. You're supposed to say, okay, go in there and get checked out. But on the other hand, I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm honestly not surprised that Shohei Ohtani's arm has kind of given out just because of how much he has been used, and the wear and tear. And honestly, I'm surprised his back is not hurting him for how much he has had to carry this team.
He's got the boulder on his back.
Right, the picture of a guy carrying a boulder, and that's Shohei Ohtani carrying the Angels.
Right, it's crazy. I mean, like, I just don't know. I don't understand. It's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm befuddled because, like, there is a code. You protect the guy so that when he goes into free agency, that he could go hit the market. Is this the Angels saying that, all right, screw him, like, we're not going to get him back. We already know that our team stinks. And on top of that, the consolation prize was that Mike Trout went back on the IL also. So this whole team is a joke. And there's another banner, I don't know where it is, if we talk about the waiver moves also, since we're talking about the Angels at this point. But we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But the Ohtani thing is a joke. The man was standing to make the largest contract in MLB history. And the Angels just said, we're going to burn him out for everything. We want all the ticket sales. We want everything on our side. And we don't care if his arm falls off. How many times this last couple of months have we heard all the announcers, all the analysts, everyone say, fatigue, the big F word, fatigue, and no, not the curse word, the fatigue word. Have we heard that? All in his last couple of starts. He's been pulled because he just doesn't have the energy to pitch because he's being overused. And the man has to hit 50 home runs and have an ERA, I think, close to 3, and it's still not enough.
But you know what's funny? This guy has a torn UCL, and he's still hitting bombs. Like, this guy is made of something else. So here's the thing. Because Shohei Ohtani is a two-way player, because Shohei Ohtani is most likely going to be the MVP of the 2023 season, even if he never pitches, another pitch for the rest of the season, like you are saying. Like, he is you're not going to detract the value of Shohei Ohtani. Now, is it going to damage the idea of him getting that ridiculous deal that that was tweeted out about, maybe he'll get a 10 or 11-year deal, like $500 million? Yeah, maybe that's but you know what? An Aaron Judge style contract, I think, is still on the table.
Well, the ridiculous number I think you and I saw, and I don't know how true it was, they were talking about 12 years, like $750 million. And I was like, hold on, slow the roll.
I have to assume that was some sort of, shit post. But at the same time, you think that Aaron Judge got 9 years and what was it, 40 million a year for 360 million?
Yeah, 360 million. Yeah.
You would have to assume Shohei, even with the UCL, even with a Tommy John, he's going to get somewhere around the ballpark of 400 to 450 million dollars.
Oh no, I think he could still get 500 million. I do, because the market is just going to keep climbing and going. But if he was able to pitch, now I'll give you a hot take in a second because of where I see this all going. But if he was able to pitch and he wasn't hurt, what they should do is they should skip a start each time that he pitches. That's really what they should do, and give him an extra recovery in between if he's going to keep pitching. But if he was still able to pitch and still pitch halfway decent, his contract would be 550, 600 million if he could still pitch.
Okay, so are you suggesting that whichever team picks him up for his two-way set, like let's say the Dodgers pick him up, are you suggesting that maybe the Dodgers go to a 6-man rotation so that way he can skip a start and they still have a normal 5-man?
Well, that's not the hot take. That's part of what I think teams should do if they want him to continue to pitch. The hot take is, I don't want him pitching ever again. That's where I would go. He's a much better hitter than he is a pitcher. By far.
Then what are you going to do with him? Because, I mean, are you going to make him like a Rick Ankiel where you're going to try to get him to the outfield?
I mean...
Only because, Nick, I don't want him to turn into a Giancarlo Stanton. I don't want him to clog up a DH slot for a team.
Okay, but there's different historical standards for the DH. Like, you had a David Ortiz who DH'd most of his career and became a Hall of Famer. Edgar Martinez became a Hall of Famer. Now, I don't know if he played first base a little bit, Edgar, but can't remember. But
he did.
But like, they were really significant hitters of their generation, Ortiz and Edgar Martinez. And I think Shohei is going to be a significant hitter of this generation. Now, I think the pitching is a waste of time. I do. I think now everyone's going to say, like, hey, pitching is great and it's valuable, but if he's going to hit 50 home runs a year, that's more valuable because that's going to keep us in games. Offense.
I mean,
imagine if he did that in Yankee Stadium. Not that I'm saying the Yankees should pay for it. I'm just saying, imagine he did that in Yankee Stadium.
Again, though, part of what makes Shohei spectacular is the fact that he can pitch and hit. And it's not that, he's okay in both. He's great at both. So teams are going to look at him with more value because they want him to pitch. Now, the idea that you kind of put out there that I kind of had to verbally explain, I don't think that's too far-fetched. I don't think that's too far-fetched for a team to maybe say, hey, maybe we form a 6-man rotation so that way he has more days of rest between starts. But to say he won't pitch again completely, I'll say this. If he has another UCL injury one more time, yeah, it's probably best that he doesn't pitch again.
Well,
but
let me say one thing, though. With the UCL injury, it's going to take time to recover. Now, I don't know, and you said it before, I don't get how he's still able to hit.
It's amazing. It's just, like I said, he is made of something else. He is made of something that other baseball players are simply
Teflon. But I just don't get it. I don't understand. Like, this guy could still hit 450, 460 foot bombs and can still hit like a magician, but he can't pitch and he keeps getting hurt. Now, I don't know. I guess he's played with injuries before. A lot of athletes play with injuries. That's not the first time we've seen guys play with injuries.
And it's not the first time. I mean, I know it's not his first time getting Tommy John, but we've also seen multiple players get with Tommy John, and we haven't really talked about it on the show, but a top point of baseball today, and talking about players today stretching to the college, high school, is the fact that more and more pitchers seem to be going to the Tommy John surgery.
But you know what's interesting about that, which is that when pitchers get Tommy John surgery, what happens? They throw harder, they throw longer. I don't understand why. Exactly. It makes no sense. But for some reason, when they get Tommy John, it makes them a whole new pitcher. I don't understand it.
I just worry, so were you saying that he should never pitch again? I can't agree on that, but the fact that it is another torn UCL, it does, and it's his second Tommy John. It does give me a little bit of concern about his usage by a team and what could happen when he starts to pitch again, because a team is going to throw him out there again.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say is you do have to take injury risk into effect now when he hits the market. He's had 2 UCL injuries. He's had 1 Tommy John. Now he's got to have another one. So usually they say it's hard to recover from one. Now he's got to have a second one. Your odds go down lower each time you have to have a new one. So if I'm the MLB teams on the market, how the hell do I give you $500 million, $600 million, and expect you're not going to burn me in the process and get hurt?
Which is why I could throw some suggestions out there about, like I said, the Aaron Judge style of contract, or maybe trying to front load the contract or something like that. But I think ultimately what MLB teams should do is it's funny, Nick, something so simple that the Angels couldn't accomplish in the 6 years that they had Shohei. Build a team around him. Build an actual team around him.
You had Trout, he just couldn't stay healthy. That's a whole nother issue in itself.
Yeah, and then they signed Anthony Rendon, and look how much of a bust that turned out to be.
Well, Eddie got suspended for fighting with fans in the stadium.
And multiple injuries.
I think he's had. Don't quote me on this. I think he had a steroid allegation. I think at one point.
No,
also.
I don't know. I don't believe it was that, but it was still multiple injuries. So you barely. It seems like it feels like he was there. Like he's not. Like you think about his time with the Nationals, where he helped lead the Nationals to World Series, and then he goes to the Angels and he's just like the Nationals. It's Anthony Rendon, and on the Angels it's just Anthony Rendon. Like there's nothing there. So, I mean, again, Nick, I think about it. That's why you think still the fact that he's the big money free agent, he's going to get big money, and the fact that teams love him for his pitching and hitting ability, and the fact that you need to build around him with other stars. That's why I keep thinking, and this torn UCL and these claims on the Angels, it's just furthering it in my mind. He's going to be a Dodger. He's going to be a Dodger next season.
I think he's either going to be a Dodger, he could be a Giant. That would be an interesting fit for him.
I do know Seattle's name popped up earlier in this season as a potential.
That would be sick with Julio Rodriguez. That would be a heck of a star tandem right there. I don't know if it'll happen. I don't know if Seattle's going to want to squat for all that money.
Yeah, I don't know if they can compete in terms of money value with what the Dodgers and what the Giants offer. But funny enough, I think that the Dodgers are going to be offering them, because you saw those moves earlier this season in the offseason, them clearing some of that money. I think that's to give Shohei essentially a bag.
But I just don't understand, and I'll never understand it when injuries happen and then like these guys hit the market. Oh, I have no problem. I'll give him $500 million. Why? Why would you give him $500 million? He just had 2 UCLs. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, he's the star. Everyone says he's the Babe Ruth. He's the lefty Babe Ruth. All right, fine. But if I'm a team right now, and this is going to sound harsh, and people are going to say, Nick, you're a hypocrite, I wouldn't sign him. I would not sign him. If I was an MLB team, I would not sign him.
I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I can agree. Now, obviously, there are some restrictions. There are some restrictions with certain teams. Like, obviously, you're not going to see a small market team like the A's or the Rays involved in there. You're not going to see the Yankees, and that's not because the Yankees are the Yankees are bad now, or in that or the luxury tax thing. I mean, yes, the luxury tax thing could play a role, but the reason the luxury tax plays a role is because of the reason that I'm going to say the Giancarlo Stanton not just the contract, but the fact that what I just said, and you were defending about how good of a DH. Well, Stanton takes up the DH, and then you need Judge to DH on the rest of it. We're already the Yankees are having a bad situation with their DH. You can't further complicate that by bringing Ohtani in.
Well, technically, what I was saying is that Ortiz was such a great DH that.
Oh, I know what you're saying with the DH. I know what you're saying with the DH. That because Paul O'Neill has talked about it, that some players can DH and DH greatly, and some can't. And I think Giancarlo Stanton is one who just can't, but they keep throwing him in that slot because they're always afraid he's going to tear something in his leg running around the bases or running around the outfield.
I mean, Jason Giambi, I guess you could say, was a good DH for the most part of his career, even though he played first base. But the Yankees finally learned, like, get him off the field. He's a detriment to himself.
2009, Hideki Matsui.
That's another good one. I mean, like, he was a good outfielder, but they just knew he couldn't be out there anymore. So they just put him in the DH spot.
And then he ends up winning the World Series MVP as a DH.
Right, the 09 series against Philly. Yeah.
Right.
But the long story short of it is the Angels have basically taken a blowtorch to Shohei's career, essentially, right now, because you can't win. And you know what? Let's go to the other Angels part of this, because this was just insane.
Well, it's not just the Angels, so I want to be fully, out there and fair with everything.
But
transparent. This is a multiple team thing. So the Angels were noticeable because they played 6 players on there, including some of the guys that they got at the trade deadline, like starting pitcher Lucas Giolito and outfielder Randall Grichuk. But the Mets were also involved in there by putting starting pitcher Carlos Carrasco on the waivers. The Yankees were involved, putting outfielder Harrison Bader on there. Now, I know about attacking the Angels and everything, yes, but if you want me to be fair and reasonable, the reason that I think teams are doing this is because of how there is no second trade deadline. So for those who don't know what I'm talking about, don't know the true business expertise about of the business side and the GM side of baseball, prior to, I think, COVID, there were 2 different forms of trade deadline. You had your July 31st, but then you had your August 31st, which involved putting a player on potential waivers. And
they call it the non-waiver trade deadline, essentially, is what they call it, usually.
Well, the July 31st one was, and then the August 31st was the waiver trade deadline.
So essentially the difference is when you get to the waiver part of the deadline, it goes to whoever qualifies at the top of the list first by team and by record. And what happens is when they're on waivers, so most of the time you're going to see like the A's and the Royals, and those teams are going to be on the top. They're going to go to each team and they're going to say, hey, do you want him? Do you want him? Do you want him? And it goes all the way down to whoever in that order can claim.
So before 2019, I'll read it right from MLB's website. Players could be traded following the trade deadline bargaining agreement. The trade deadline almost always fell on July 31st. So what would happen is the commissioner's office now has the flexibility to set the trade deadline between July 28th and August 3rd if they first clear revocable trade waivers. Although trades could still be completed after August 31st as well, players acquired after that date were ineligible to be added to the postseason roster by their new team. So
that's always been the case.
Well, so August 31st under the old system used to be the waiver trade deadline. So what would happen is if a trade happened involving certain players, they would first have to pass through the waiver system where all the other teams, in an order from, I think it's from like last place to first place, would have to pass on them.
Right. So like I said, it would start, most of the time it's going to start with the A's and the Royals and go down.
Right. So, but the idea that the likes of, I think, Jeff Pass and Nigel are talking about is because of that, now what you're probably going to see from this year on is, our players getting dumped. Because now what happens is, if one of these guys gets taken up by a contending team within the first 10 days of being placed on waivers, then the other team has to take on the full value of the contract for the rest of the year. So, the full value of the rest of the contract, but I say of the year because if you look at these names, you notice something all about them? All free agents.
I was going to say, I thought they were all free agents. I remember that.
So really, if you're a contending team, you're taking up that contract for September and October. So, I mean, that's the thing. Maybe the luxury tax might play a role as to why certain teams don't go for some of these guys, but now if you're one of these teams and you need an outfielder or bat that you think can take you over the top, well, look, Harrison Bader and Randall Grichuk are there. If you need a starting pitcher, guess what? Lucas Giolito.
That one surprised me a little, the Lucas Giolito, because like he was a big name at the deadline that people were looking to acquire, and the Angels thought, "Oh, we're just going to acquire one pitcher, and we're going to acquire some guys, and we're just going to make a run into the playoffs."
Well, it didn't work, but you know what?
It blew up in their face.
Right, but you know what? Great opportunity for Lucas Giolito now. Now, because you can't tell me one of these teams is not now. It may not happen within the first 10 days just to make the Angels pay for the contract. But you can't tell me one of these teams that are on the verge of playing in October is not going to pick up Lucas Giolito to add to their rotation.
If I'm the Rangers, if I'm the Astros, if I'm the Braves, all teams that are really competitive right now. By the way, any of these guys should be begging to go to Atlanta right now, like in the worst way, shape, or form. Like Atlanta's going to be the team. I think Atlanta's the team to beat right now.
Oh, absolutely. Atlanta's my pick right now as the World Series champ. It's like I told you off the air. I think we're going to have another Astros Braves World Series, and I think the Braves are just going to flat out dominate them.
I think the Braves are much better than they were the last time they played. I mean, that core that they have built up, it's going to be insane. The one thing I just want to bring up about that, Harrison Bader. Did you see the story that happened with Harrison Bader, how he found out? Hank did a video on this for hitting
in
for
the lunchroom
cycle.
In the lunchroom 10 days before, 10 minutes before the game.
And he was watching, he said to
ESPN.
yes. But he said to yes, like, I never watch ESPN. My name came up on the screen while they were talking about waiver moves. I mean, and by the way, you have to go watch this video that Hank did. It's on at HFTC ETB across platforms. It's on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. That basically, Brian Cashman, how do you not tell him to his face before he finds out on ESPN?
Well, you know what I can say to that, Nick? You know what I can say to that?
What?
Yankees country, let's ride!
I knew you. I mean, but I don't know. Now this is going to become a dump period because now that there's no like deadline, so to speak, except technically August 31st at midnight, because that's when guys are still eligible for the playoffs. You don't really see that anymore, where like teams will just acquire someone right after August 31st just to get into the playoffs. Like, oh, you're not eligible.
You know what? But you know what? Now any of these teams that need somebody for the end of the season and the postseason, you could just get them right off waivers. And if you're not happy with these waiver dump moves, don't blame the Angels. You know who you can blame?
Excuse me. That's a good point. I mean, but it's just a very odd situation. The Angels, like you said, look the worst because they made the most moves. And their owner, as Hank would say, should be in jail. Artie Moreno should be in jail for half the shit that he's pulled. And I wish he would just sell the team and move on, but it's not that easy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of selling the team and speaking of should be in jail, let's talk about the White Sox.
Yeah, so this is kind of nuts. So this happened last week, I think.
I think during the weekend or towards the weekend.
So at Guaranteed Rate Field, the Chicago White Sox home, they canceled a Vanilla Ice concert after the game after shots from a gun went off. And apparently there was a shooting, but you're going to find this interesting. It was kind of a Plexico Burris situation.
So somebody apparently, according to a White Sox reporter, brought the gun into the stadium, basically hit it on their person, and the gun managed to basically go off. Now you have the weird detail about this.
So, not that it matters, but a female fan who got it past, I guess, the metal detector security. I didn't know all stadiums have metal detector security now, but she hid the gun in her belly fat.
Which, number one, what in tarnation?
Yeah.
And number two, Nick, I want you to say the thing again, that it got past metal detectors.
It got past the metal detectors, yes.
That's a problem. That's a big problem.
You know what the problem is, though? You can't touch anybody anymore when you do security. That's the problem.
But that is a huge, huge security issue. Your metal detectors couldn't detect a gun on the person, regardless of the fact that the gun was under belly fat. That is a significant issue, and as a result, I think because the gun accidentally discharged, she got hurt, and a few others around her got hurt.
2 other fans got wounded, but
you saw that footage of like everybody scattering in the field.
Yeah, that was kind of bizarre. But first, what I really wanted to say was because the gun getting past the metal detector. Now, let's be careful because we're not trying to fat shame anybody here. But
no. The blame, you can talk about the idea of bringing a gun into a baseball stadium, a concealed carry or whatnot. You could talk about all those different you could talk about that as a legal issue and a gun rights issue. But my thing, Nick, is I want to blame the Chicago White Sox organization because, number one, as we said, with the fact that you have metal detectors and you have security there, that should have been picked up on and stopped right there. And then it goes off during the game. And then the post-game concert gets canceled. Now, here's the thing, Nick, it's 2023. We have these.
Yeah.
We have phones. We have social media. So words will spread like wildfire. And the people who scattered all over the place. So, I just don't understand why why the organization decides. I understand why they canceled the concert, but to then look at the fans with the video message board and put it up that due to technical difficulties. What, do you think your fans have no intelligence?
I mean, I was going to say that was really bad, that they didn't want to be real. I mean, like back in the early 2000s or even before 9/11, when we didn't have to worry about security issues as much because we didn't have that unfortunate circumstance happen yet. Like, security was unfortunately lax because people didn't think. After 9/11, security went up tenfold because now we're worried about everybody that goes in a stadium. But unfortunately, you let a gun into a stadium. I mean, we've all heard weird stories on the news of how people sneak weapons into unfortunate circumstances. I don't really need to say what those circumstances are inside of people, but my point is, this is bad. And we all know the man upstairs is not going to do anything about it.
And it's amazing to me. Well, first of all, you saw the footage of them chanting "sell the team" with that. How loud that got! Like, that got as loud as the A's fans when they have the protest Fisher night. Like, it was loud. And you know what? I give the White Sox no sympathy. I give Jerry Reinsdorf no sympathy. At that point, that is just, Nick, emblematic of the kind of mess that the Chicago White Sox have from the top of their organization with Jerry Reinsdorf all the way down to the now former executive vice president, president baseball operations general manager, all the way down to the players on the field. Of all the incidents of Tim Anderson and all the fact that there seems to be no rules. At this point, the White Sox are getting what they deserve. And you know what? I think they deserve to sit here to sell the team chant when you're openly supposedly talking about a potential move out of Chicago, one of the biggest and most metropolitan cities in the United States, a city that has been home to baseball for over a century. And you're potentially eyeing Nashville. This is utterly ridiculous. It is utterly ridiculous of how this organization is run.
Yeah, I mean, and we all know what's going to happen because the owners are basically going to tune it out. They're going to say, "I'm rich. I have my money. I don't care what the fans think. I'm just going to keep raking in my millions and billions, and I don't really give a shit what the fans think, even if they get grazed by a gun bullet because somehow someone snuck a gun in there. To them, it's money. It's all about the money. It is." And I'm reading another report from Bruce Levine, who also covers the White Sox. According to police report, 3
Hold
female...
Hold on one second, because I was taken off guard for that.
So Bruce Levine said, according to the police report, 3 female fans in Section 162 were wounded at Guaranteed Rate Field. 1 grazed back wound, 1 grazed leg wound, 1 stomach graze. Only 1 transported to University of Chicago Hospital. None considered life-threatening. How gun went off is being investigated. They're going to be investigating this till the dawn of time because Rob Manfred's going to do nothing. Nothing.
Hold on. Where is it again? Here you go.
Good old Rob Manfred, because Rob doesn't care. Rob's just sitting up in the office counting the money from all the dumb streams he wants.
And speaking of, I mean, about the White Sox eyeing Nashville, the Milwaukee, supposedly he's putting the pressure on Milwaukee to, get the new public funds to renovate the stadium. The Orioles owner threatening, hey, I'll trade all the young talent. Maybe I'll move out of Baltimore. At some point, Rob has to. I get the owners are his bosses. I get it. But at some point, Rob has to step in and say, for the love of the game, stop.
Yeah, and it's all to save pennies over dimes. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing in the entire world. All right, so I'll save an extra $1 million, but I have to go take taxpayer money and public money. Hey, MLB owners, raise the money yourself. You have it. You have the millions of dollars. You just don't want to reach into your pocket. You're Mr. Krabs, as Hank would say.
Meanwhile, the Yankees, with their horrible record, already looking to increase ticket prices for September in 2024.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I told you about a podcast I was listening to with a guy who was a guest on this podcast a while back, Jimmy Trano, who does the SI Media podcast. He was interviewing Charles Barkley. Now, this applies to all sports, not just the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
But Charles made a really good point, saying that for teams that don't make the playoffs, there should be a rule that you can't raise your ticket prices for the upcoming year.
I remember, Nick, I know this is going off of podcast into personal, but an old friend of mine from college, so we're Facebook friends. And when the New York Rangers were going through their really bad phase in 2017, it seemed like every game he was posting in all caps to Facebook, lower your ticket prices. And then, and you know what's funny? After the letter came out, the famous letter about trading all the pieces, getting younger, the Rangers put out, I actually shared this on my Facebook page and I said, thank you for your honesty. And then a couple of lines down in all caps, in the words of my friend, lower your ticket prices.
I mean, I agree with what Charles said on Jimmy's podcast, that if your team stinks and you don't make the playoffs, or you tank, which you can't prove, obviously, except for the Mavs, even though they'll never say it. But if you tank or you lose and you don't make the playoffs, you should have to keep your ticket prices the same until you win, at least have a winning record, or make the playoffs.
All right. In some other news around baseball, Stephen Strasburg, the Nationals pitcher, the very famed one who was drafted in 2009, had all the hype around him, is going to retire. So earlier this year, he was diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome. Basically, something I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to explain this in layman's terms, but that's something to do with his nerves, something that's to do with his arm. Obviously, he's had multiple injuries with his pitching arm, and unfortunately, he was unable to overcome that. And so next Saturday, September 9th, at a news conference at Nationals Park, he is expected to announce his retirement.
So it says that thoracic outlet syndrome is a term that refers to 3 related syndromes involving compression of the nerves, arteries, and veins in the lower neck and upper chest area. This compression causes pain in the arm, shoulder, and neck, which makes sense because he had shoulder and arm pain.
Right, and it has been continuous, for him, especially especially from 2020 onwards. And unfortunately, I guess he was just, Nick, the way that you explain it, where you talk about the arm, the neck, and the chest, honestly, he has to retire because that's something that can screw you up for life. And we talk about, Nick, about injuries. We talk about wanting a good and healthy life post-playing career, regardless of sport. And that's where Stephen Strasburg is at, where he needs to really think about. Now, Did he have a fantastic career to the hype that he should have when he was drafted first overall in 2009, made that awesome debut in 2010, where he had, I think, 10 plus, still to double-digit strikeouts in that game? Probably not. But he definitely has made some memories with the Nationals that can't be forgotten, like that debut, like the early part of his career. And Nick, nothing will ever take away from him that 2019 magical postseason where he ends up becoming the MVP, and he ends up basically leading that team with phenomenal pitching performance after pitching performance. So, you know what? Maybe it wasn't the kind of career that we thought Stephen Strasburg should have, being the number one overall pick all those years ago. But you can say he definitely played his role in the team going from, moving from Montreal to Washington, being one of the worst in baseball, to them 10 years later going from Nick, if you think about that 2019 season where they were basically bottom of the barrel and rode all the way back up to the World Series. You can't take it away.
No, he was a dominant pitcher. He came up as a dominant name. If you think about it, him and Bryce Harper actually were up in domination
back-to-back
together.
Back-to-back picks in the first, number one picks in back-to-back years. I think Strasburg was 09 and Harper was 10.
Right. So you had that whole thing come up. Everyone was excited. They thought they were going to be the next gigantic duo. Then Harper goes off to Philly. That ends that. Strasburg continues to try and pitch, but it just didn't. He kept going in and out of injury. And the sick part is he's owed $150 million in retirement.
I will. You know what? I will give it to the Nationals, though. That they want to take care of him and pay him. Like that's great
gotta
for them.
Suck, though. It's got to suck, though.
It is a disappointment that, his career ends in the way that it did. But you know what? At least he managed to go out with a World Series MVP, with a World Series ring around him. And he did get the big contract. So, you know what? He did kind of win at the end. It's not the best kind of ending to a career, but he did win at the end.
I guess it's a good point. I mean, did he pitch well? Yes, but career ended too short. Put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on from that, little report from ESPN per Juan Arturo Recio. Prosecutors in the Dominican Republic are investigating a second formal complaint lodged by an underage girl against Tampa Bay Rays shortstop Wander Franco. So I think what this is that, if you remember, Nick, when we first talked about the Wander Franco thing, we had the one social media post, the one that that was being investigated. But then that came out, that statement from, I think it was the Attorney General in the DR, that said about they were looking at a second potential complaint. And I think this is just now the formality now.
This is the official statement that this has finally come out. But now that it's being investigated or almost confirmed in some aspects, this is getting worse for Wander Franco.
I mean, Nick, my stance doesn't change from last week. I mean, maybe, or whenever we talked about this last, you just got to hope that maybe this all proves to be untrue and Wander Franco can get back on the field. But it's like I said, you know what? The Rays have to play worst case scenario. So you saw all the signs and imagery of him getting taken down. It's for the best at this point. Like, if Wander Franco does come back, if he does come back, great. But I think the Rays just now have to play. You have to imagine life without him. Even if he does come back, it's like, okay, we can't count on that short term or long term. So let's play the role that he's not going to be back. And then if he does, you know what? Great for us. But right now, it's just a matter of they got to play the long game. They got to play the long game, especially when you look at, the Orioles now on top and competing with them. The Yankees, if you're the Rays, you hope the Yankees and Red Sox are going to their paths of irrelevancy, and the Blue Jays continue to not live up to their potential. So, this is the Rays' time. Now, does it suck they don't have Wander Franco? Yeah, but you know what? What do we always talk about, Nick, with injuries and suspensions and everything else about sports that we've been sick of here about the you work around it. So obviously the Wander Franco, he's still getting paid and such, but the Rays have always been known, Nick, as a team that didn't have the most value in terms of their bankroll, but always made things work. So, you got to look at this with worst case scenario eyes.
I don't. This is me. I would not take him back. There's too much flying reputation around this guy at this point where you have the allegations, regardless or not. You know how the world works. Even if like you're 100%, like you're proven innocent, you're left with a reputation that's impossible to repair when these situations come out. I mean, if I'm Tampa, I'm done. I'm avoiding this contract and I'm walking away.
Can they though? Can they? Or is Major League Baseball going to say, well, because remember we had this conversation with Trevor Bauer when he had the allegations a couple of years ago with sexual misconduct.
No, I know, and I mean that one they had the actual evidence and everything. They had the pictures. Oh, first of all, Trevor Bauer is never going to get back to Major League Baseball ever again.
Oh no, I know he's not. He got demoted to the Japanese league
minor league system. Yes, and people say, "Oh, he's pitching so well." Again, he wants to be in Major League Baseball so bad. He's never getting back here. And if Rob Manfred allows him to get back here, that's a whole nother issue that we're going to have to deal with. But Wander Franco's got to go. Or I would just say, if you want to come back, it's not with us. No bueno, not coming back here. It's a bad move.
One other thing to note from baseball, story from Bob Nightengale. These rumors have been spitting like wildfire ever since the reports came out about Verlander and Scherzer supposedly not getting along. Verlander supposedly being a diva, which Scherzer came out and basically said none of that is true. But per Bob Nightengale, the Mets are expected to trade first baseman Pete Alonso during the upcoming offseason. Now, what's interesting is, Nick, you had a report right before we started recording that some Mets players want to meet with
Steve Cohen.
Yes, Steve Cohen. Want to meet with Steve Cohen and basically talk about Pete Alonso and want him to not trade Pete Alonso.
Well, here's the weird thing about this. So there were a lot of reports going around, obviously, because they were making all the trades and they were dumping everybody. Pete Alonso clubhouse cancer. That was the report that was going around.
Yeah.
Now, Pete Alonso was a little bit of a ego maniac when it comes to certain things. But are you going to trade someone that hits 30 to 40 home runs a year and going to drive in 120, 130 RBIs a year? You're going to trade that away? Now, he came up on the older side also, like Judge did. So he really didn't have a leg to stand on contract-wise. So he's still under arbitration, I think, for one other year, right?
Yes, I believe so.
So that he's pissed off because he's had to sit through arbitration this whole time. He wants to be paid. Now, I don't know. Like, are they doing this because basically Steve Cohen and Billy Epler came out and said that, well, we're not competing until 2026. Oh, I heard
26.
That's brutal in New York.
I'm wondering if that was just a lie to Scherzer and Verlander to get out of their contracts. Get out of their contracts, which they're still
Cohen
paying.
had to pay that. Cohen had to pay that to Houston.
Right. But, something just tells me, are they opening those slots up to get some more talent in here?
You know why that sounds ridiculous? Not you. I'm just saying why that would be ridiculous, because you had to eat the money anyway.
Right.
So why wouldn't you just let them stay, build the team? You owe him $45 million next year.
But my thoughts that I really think that for how much they're paying, the Mets should have gotten more prospects or a little better of prospects than what they got.
Well, they were money dumping. If you remember, like they were sending money to teams to get a better prospect from people, which again, that was a little strange in itself. But this is Steve Cohen.
The other thing I'm wondering, because that report that some players went in to basically try to talk to Steve Cohen and say, oh, don't trade him. I'm wondering if that locker room, if all these stories that, are true or because, or if there's some sort of smoke, there's fire. I'm wondering if maybe there's a civil war going on in that clubhouse where you got Team Alonso and Team Anti-Alonso.
No, it's Team Steve Cohen, and that's the only team that exists. Because Steve Cohen will spend the money, whatever he wants. You notice that the Wilpons, I can't believe I'm saying those names again, but when the Wilpons owned the Mets, you know how difficult they made it to make trades and moves because they didn't want to spend the money. Well, it didn't help that they had a huge Ponzi scheme involved in their payroll, but they made it impossible to make moves. Steve Cohen, I'll write you a check. It's only going to cost me 2% of my net worth, and I'll make the guy go. He made Justin Verlander go away for $40 million. Just said, go ahead, go away. We don't need you. Take the $40 million with you. It's a going away present. By the way, I just saw a report. I don't know if this is accurate or not. That the Mets are planning to promote Ronnie Mauricio, however you pronounce his name, not the Yankee. It's a Mets prospect, Ronnie Mauricio. I think it's one of their biggest.
For the September call-ups.
Yeah, apparently they're bringing him up tomorrow for the Friday roster. So, so now we're seeing the Yankees and the Mets bring up their huge prospect.
Well, neither team is playing for anything at this point, so might as well. All right, we're running out of time. Let's get to some football news. Now, obviously, most of football that we talked about with Johnny Montalbano and Henkin Dichter on our big two-part ETB Network NFL preview, which the NFC and postseason, which was part 2, dropped today. Part 1 dropped yesterday with the AFC, so go check those out. However, a little bit of an update. We were recording it on the cutdown day, so we were actually watching in real time, trying to get any news about Jonathan Taylor. So during the NFC one, you actually get our live reactions to what happened with Jonathan Taylor. And what that is that the Colts ultimately will not trade Jonathan Taylor because they are not getting the value supposedly that they sought for him. You heard a couple of teams in the mix. Supposedly the Dolphins were in the mix big time to try and acquire him. And the team ultimately placed Taylor on the physically unable to perform list, citing some sort of injury, and he will be guaranteed to miss the first 4 games of the regular season. Now, just quick thoughts on it. It's like what I said on the preview stream, and I'll say it here. For all the talk that we had trying to basically talk about the depressed running back market, the same one where after that Zoom call, you saw Saquon sign. We're going to talk about Josh Jacobs in a second, ending his holdout. So what I don't understand is those comments made by Jim Irsay, where he's like, that basically implying, I don't want to take his words, out of context. So basically implying that, hey, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't want to play for us, we'll move along. I don't understand how you can say that.
Well, they said he's replaceable. He's replaceable by anybody. Is right. Essentially what he said.
My point is, I don't understand how you can say that and then go, "Oh, we want a first-round pick for him." Like, I get it. I get the words that I said, and that Jonathan Taylor is the best player on that team. But to say right before that he is replaceable, I mean, there was an offer there supposedly where a couple of teams were offering a package with second-round picks. I don't understand why you don't do that trade. And I say that only because I understand best player in team Jonathan Taylor for all his value. Maybe you want the first, but Nick, what have we talked about with taking a running back in the first round?
It doesn't work out because it just doesn't work. You'll be lucky if you get 2.5, 3 years out of a running back at this point. The whole Jonathan Taylor thing is ridiculous. Now, Jim Irsay is the biggest hypocrite of owner. I said it during the stream. He's running up there with Jerry Jones as being one of the more hypocritical owners in all of the NFL. Because Jim Irsay will say horrible, shitty things. And
he's a big mouth.
Also, he should be careful because he should know all about being an asshole with his DUIs. But my point is, Jim Irsay should just shut his mouth. We know he's got the power because he owns the franchise. He makes a decision. And because you didn't take him off the PUP list, now he's out for 4 games and you can't use him anyway. So I can't wait to see all the fantasy drafts that are going to try and draft him.
Oh, my God. So he was already projected as like a 4th-round pick, and now he's going to go down even further to like 6th or 7th.
He's going to be a good value pick for somebody in fantasy.
But it's got to be worth missing the 4 games, and that's if he comes back after the 4 games.
Because he's got to work out, get back to shape. Yeah, I mean,
and he's going to want to try and play this season.
Yeah, because his contract value is going to be a mess now after missing 4 games. So I don't know.
But we do, as I mentioned, there is one running back that did end his holdout. Josh Jacobs did end his holdout. He has agreed, very similarly to Saquon, a 1-year deal. However, there are some incentives in there that he can earn up to $12 million this season.
Yeah, I mean, we all knew this eventually was going to happen. I mean, Josh Jacobs is actually a decent running back. I mean, the Raiders just don't want to spend the money. I don't blame them, by the way, but he had to come back. He probably saw the writing on the wall when Saquon came back and said, all right, I got to get back on the field. I got to play with my team.
Like I said during the stream, the football stream, I'm just wondering, if these running backs like Saquon and Jacobs get tagged again, is it just going to be same song and dance next season?
Probably, but I don't know exactly what the rules are for tags. I think it's 2 or 3 years straight. Then they have to be a free agent. But running backs just don't have the value. We proved it. They just don't. And unfortunately, guys like Saquon and Josh Jacobs are going to pay the price.
Speaking of paying a price, well, not much of a price. So the San Francisco 49ers quarterback battle, Nick, is officially over. Brock Purdy is going to be the starter. Mr. Irrelevant earned his keep last season, and he is going to be the starter for the 49ers. And the backup is going to be your old buddy and Sam Darnold. So that leaves Trey Lance, the man that they traded with 3 first-round picks for, on the outs. And they have announced a trade. They are acquiring a 4th-round pick from, how about them Cowboys? Speaking of Jerry Jones, Trey Lance going over to the Cowboys. And Nick, can I be, you want to hear from Jerry? We heard from Jerry earlier today on the NFC, but you know why we made this move? Because number one, as you said, we need to be talked about. Number 2, I need to put the pressure on Dak. This is a year where we need to deliver. We don't have Zeke, but you know what? We don't need Zeke. Tony Pollard is going to do just fine. And you think about the receivers that we have, Dak should have all the potential in the world. So if Dak does not deliver, if we miss the playoffs, if we don't get past the first round of the playoffs, who's going to pay the price? It ain't going to be me. It's going to be Dak, because he's going to have no value in that quarterback market. How about them Cowboys? Screw those Eagles. Yeah, I heard your little co-host, Tom Albano, talking about, the Eagles are head and shoulder above everybody in the NFC. Screw him.
Oh, my God. I feel like we're going to hear a lot from Jerry this season. I have a feeling. No, but Jerry, why'd you get Trey Lance? He's not going to come in and play for you.
Like I said, I'm putting the pressure on Dak. I'm trying to send a message. Hey, if you don't want to deliver, I'll get somebody who will. You can be replaced. Just like my friend Jim Irsay told Jonathan Taylor.
Are you actually going to start Trey Lance when Dak doesn't make the playoffs?
Potentially. Why would I tell my ideas to you?
Oh, God. Oh, man, this is going to be a fun season for watch the Cowboys.
All right. One last story that I want to talk about. Nick, if you don't mind, if I have the floor for this one. So I'm not going to take too long because I know we're coming up on an hour or so. But I do want to make mention, as somebody in the combat sports world, about the passing of WWE superstar Bray Wyatt. So I wrote a blog for this on the ETV podcast website, so feel free to check that out. But essentially, Bray Wyatt, we have not seen Bray Wyatt in quite a few months. I think it was February, because as it turns out, according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful, he ended up having COVID. As a result, that complicated some heart issues. He had, slips my mind, but some sort of device with his heart, and he went to take a nap, I think it was last Thursday, did not have the device on him, and he passed away in his sleep. But, like I said, he hasn't been... Were you going to say something, Nick?
Yeah, so it was a doctor-recommended heart defibrillator.
Yeah, so thank you. It was a heart defibrillator. He did not have that on him when he ended up taking a nap. He passes away. We don't know if the heart defibrillator would have saved him or not. Regardless, it is a huge loss for the wrestling community, because it is the death of one of, I think, the most creative and innovative minds of today's wrestling industry, because he came up with, as I talk about in that little blog post, just thinking about his ride to the WWE. He had actually a football scholarship to Troy University, but he wanted to be a wrestler. He came up in a wrestling family. His father, better known as IRS, the sidekick to the $1 Million Man. His brother was in WWE at the same time that he was. His uncle was Barry Windham, who's also been going through his own health issues, former NWA Heavyweights champion. That's the NWA prior to, when WCW spinned off into its own thing. And I quoted this during the blog post. I know Renee Paquette in AEW quoted this right before the All In pay-per-view when they were doing the panel. He talked about Bray Wyatt, a.k.a. Wyndham Rotunda's passing. He had a blog post in August of 2022 during the time in which he was released from WWE before he came back under the Triple H regime. Wrestling is not a love story. It's a fairy tale for masochists, a comedy for people who criticize punchlines, a fantasy most can't understand, a spectacle no one can deny. Lines are blurred, heroes are villains, budgets are cut, business is business. But it can also be a land where dead men walk, where honor makes you elite, where demons run for office, and rock bottom is a reason to rejoice. Woo, it's an escape. A reason to point the blame at anyone but yourself for 2 to 3 hours. An excuse to be a kid again. And nothing matters except the moment we're in. Wrestling's not a love story. It's much more. It's hope. And in a world surrounded in hate, greed, and violence, a world where closure may never come, we all know a place that has hot and cold hope on tap, for better or for worse. And I don't know anybody else who could have explained professional wrestling and the reason it is popular and the reason people turn to it in a better way than Wyndham Rotunda did. And you think about all the characters that he created between, Bray Wyatt, the cult leader that just drove people in with his words, and how he was the new face of fear, and then this character that's been took over during the 2020s, well, end of 2019 into the 2020s, all over social media and the wrestling feeds, of The Fiend, where you have the Jekyll and Hyde, where you have the Mr. Rogers character in that little Firefly funhouse, and then you have him wearing that demonic clown mask, and it was unbelievable. Like, you can now, and it's like I said in the blog post, we can talk about all the bad that happened with how his character got treated and how his character was booked. And, life is not fair. But you know what? He made life better for everybody in the wrestling business. WWE actually just posted a whole bunch of, it was like 40 minutes of tributes to him from his various colleagues at WWE. And you know what? If you hear those stories, you can see the kind of person that Wyndham Rotunda was. And that stretches over to all the social media posts made by guys in WWE and AEW and all over the wrestling business. Wyndham Rotunda was such a giving and caring individual. And you know what? Life was much better with his presence. And he's going to be missed.
Yeah, and I saw the video. I think you saw me post it across the social media platforms.
Bray Wyatt with the little kid.
Yeah, which was incredible. To me, I think I said this to you before, that I feel like WWE wrestlers have the most attachment to the crowds and the audience. That's just something I've seen. Like, they're always out greeting fans. Little kids is the biggest group that the demo wise, you see them getting more into wrestling because they actually interact with wrestlers.
Yep. And that's the thing, wrestling, well, at least WWE, has always been a kid and a family-friendly driven product, except for obviously the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression eras. But, but when you think about the golden age of the 80s and the early to mid 90s, and ever since they've gone back to PG around 2008, they have always been a family-friendly product. And you know what? You always like to see those experiences with the kids, because those are experiences that they'll never forget. That's why when you see that recording of Bray going up to the kid and hugging him and allowing, the photos to be taken, everything, that's making memories that kid will hold on to forever. So,
right. And on top of that, you have John Cena, who I think does it the best.
The Make-A-Wish, the fact that he has 500 and he was like, he never wants the publicity for it. He always wants to just do it because he's always felt that as the face of WWE up until the point where he went off to make more movies around like late 2019, 2020. That those are the fans and those are the lifeblood. Like the fans are the lifeblood of the product. And you think about the Make-A-Wish, like that's something. Charity is something that you do as an individual. Charity is something that you do as the face of the company. So when you have all these kids who their wish is to see you have a responsibility to make that happen and to, make it an unbelievable experience for them and help create a memory, something that they'll hold on to for the remainder of their life. And as they're battling illnesses and such.
And I think that's why WWE is more about the entertainment. I know people get mad at that sometimes and they say it's more about the entertainment, but that's what WWE is. It's an entertainment, I guess, entertainment/sport in a sense, because you're trying to create an aspect or a memory that people will remember along with storylines. Like that, that's the big thing. And like I said, John Cena and even The Rock was good at that, like interacting with fans.
Yeah.
Those two guys are probably the best when it comes to directing. And I heard Wyatt was good at it too. Like,
yes.
So,
and I think he summed it up best when he's like, wrestling is not a love story. It's something more. I think all you got to do is just look at that Instagram post and look at the other one he made where he basically said, cherish your loved ones. You never know when, nothing lasts forever in this world. So
it's a good point.
I just want to say thank you to Wyndham Rotunda. And, hopefully the big wrestling ring in the sky is ready for a character that they will have forever that we were able to cherish on Earth.
Yeah. And like I said, like it's not easy. I mean, the WWE community went through a big loss. And if I remember correctly, I think, what was it, on SmackDown? They did
a tribute show, 10 Bell Salute, which is a normal in the combat sports world. Well, you're talking about loss. The day before Bray Wyatt, there was a wrestling legend in Terry Funk who had passed away. So they had a responsibility to do basically tributes for two guys on one show, and they delivered on that SmackDown.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, they really kept it silent for a period of time. But I guess that pretty much sums it up for this episode. Yep. Follow us on social media at ETB Sports, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ETB Sports. Follow the Empty Bench Pods. Let's try that sentence again. Follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow on our YouTube channel and subscribe down below. Hit the button, youtube.com/ETB Network. Follow our website at etbpodcast.com. All the latest blogs and info on everything in the world of sports and entertainment. Make sure you listen to us on the audio-only platforms. iHeart, Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the other platforms that we have available to you. So I guess that just about does it for episode 198. For Tom Albano, I'm Nick Morgasen. 2 episodes away from 200. Good night, everybody.
See you around, everybody.